as you look around it, no?
Did you want to say? Lotus is laying next to me. She doesn't feel good and she's saying hi, but you can't hear her.
Okay, hi.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, what's wrong?
Go log on for a second.
We're gonna get you maybe.
You want to
What do
be
you
this?
think of these tuners? You want to try one of those? Here, they say you can do it like this. Hi. You're not feeling so good? Yeah, I'll try to. Let me see if I can do this correctly.
That makes some nice sounds for you.
Or let me see if I can do it this way. Can you hear that? So once you put that against you, there's a vibration that comes that you hear. And then they say sometimes you can put it, there's a whole book on treating yourself. So I haven't done it yet. You have done it. Oh, here, you can show. Yeah. Ari, you see this? Take a look at this. Oh,
Yeah, these ones are, this is a deeper one.
okay. Let me try that one.
It's a what?
It's got a rock on the bottom instead of just metal. So it's amethyst. There's
It seems nice to play with, you know.
You can put it on sore spots, or they even have a lip one that they recommend for keeping.
And then sometimes, like for me, because look, I'm an old geezer, so sometimes I don't feel well. But there's nothing wrong with me. But sometimes you don't feel well. And if you say, well, what's wrong? You say, well, I don't know, because so I'll try these things. You know, another thing that I do, though, is I take a ball and I throw it against the wall outside and catch it, or throw it up in the air and, you know, just do like that, where you'll kind of awaken inner memories where you used to catch the ball and stuff like that, you know. And ooh, man, oh, that went into my ear, though. That said, shut up.
It did.
It's still saying, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up.
No.
No, that's not a shut up.
Maybe it's shut up.
Go ahead, you got. I'll hold my ears. Make that noise again. And
I'll
see
do
if
a
it's
different,
that was a shut up noise.
partially the same.
Oh, that's not bad, but it does catch your ear, Erja. I'm being vibrated. So now this is coming with me, what's happening where we were discussing where you can talk to your body. Like almost, it's almost like it's your baby and you're caring for, or you discover that. So sometimes, and what happens, sometimes we get so sick that we have to look at our life again. And then you start to see that you took your body for granted when it was a beautiful thing that was happening. And you only find out about it when you get sick or something happens. But there's a moment when where you come to a hey baby with your body, with you, like I said, when my knee hurt so bad, and it wasn't a question of just getting rid of it. It was a question of finding out what was happening and really looking at it. And in looking at it, you kind of met, through the pain, you met your knee for the first time, where you saw how amazing your body has been all this time. And you only become aware of it at certain times. But okay, and yet it's influenced your life in so many ways. So you meet your being, you meet yourself as a being in some way. Not only as a literal person, but you also see yourself, that there are moments that throw you into deep reflection. And then you're no longer the person that you are literally. You see that you visit a much different world too in yourself. And the world is not so identity owned, but something sends you there. You can only get there with a kind of passport where you have to be genuine when you're visiting.
Yeah.
So it does seem that there is a parallel world that we have in our being is a future world. But from my experience now is a parallel world all along that is reflective in what you're doing. So let's say you took up India and you took up Krishna and you took up these stories in your exploration of what is going on, who am I, what is happening in life. And that very mirror was also parallel with you in the story. You see. And so there's the literal you that is trying to find this other dimension in life. And you see this other dimension in life is right a quarter of an inch away from you at all times. And there are certain accidents that happen where you visit it.
Yeah.
And as you visit it, becomes your world, more or less. But you're also between worlds, because as you're visiting that world, it makes the literal world more violent looking. Because it is violent. It's not because it's falsely violent or something. You see the literal quest for the dollar, the literal quest to succeed, the competition with the, it creates a, oh, hi, Catherine. Is that you there? Hi. Hi.
Bye. Hi.
So you see that somehow there's a literal reality, the literalness that this is you as an identity, and the continuity of this literal reality is its main focus. But you also see that every now and then you visit a parallel you. It's not literalized that way, but is exploratory. Urja, how are you?
I'm okay, Danny. Thank
I'm
you.
having an echo effect here. That sounds interesting.
Yes.
But it also sounds as if I'm going to leave the body very quickly.
Oh, it's gone. It's gone now.
Okay. It was otherworldly a little bit.
Yes, it was.
So let me ask you all how you guys are doing then. How are you doing then? Since we have Urja's huge picture here now.
Oh, yes?
Like that size. But
Oh,
that's
Danny.
good. So I can see deep into your being.
My wrinkles.
How are you seeing it?
I see five little screen.
This one.
Oh, this is you're seeing everything in this moment, Jimmy. Or I'm saying from the perspective of, since you have a balcony that overlooks the street and the passerby and
It's
the
really nice.
situation, how does life appear to you from the balcony looking out where you're in it, but you're not of it? Someone might wave at you or say, hey, Urja, when they're going past, but somehow you're watching the traffic go past, you're watching the people work, you're watching that from the balcony. So you have a kind of example of being in it, but not of it. You may shout out into the street and create a link, but somehow you're the observer. And you see life unfolding, people doing things on their way, but you're not doing, you're observing. And you see that you can interact with the activity and it may stop or stall for a moment. So you're seeing somehow a photograph of existence that has so many dimensions in it. And you see it's not as if these dimensions are new, they have been explored in all sorts of art forms. The parallel happenings that the person is aware of only in different time zones. In retrospect, they may become somehow aware. So it doesn't seem that informing the identity is that important. would you say, Catherine? It doesn't seem that the life force is that interested in saying to the identity, look, this is what's happening. You're going to assume an identity and navigate this life force. Okay. So somehow the person enters confused. And confused seems to be undercurrent that runs through the literal story. That you assume identities by training, by substance or whatever, but somehow whatever identity you develop, you run into some obstacle in it that seems like an obstacle, but in retrospect, kind of saved your life because it forced you to reflect.
Yeah.
And any element that deeply forced you to reflect, you see was feared. If you were in the military and there was someone who, be careful of that person, it's a reflective person, who doesn't take orders naturally, etc. Okay. So then you understood that reflection was not looked upon, it was looked upon as something that would interrupt the status quo of training and a situation like that. It's only in retrospect that you see your screw up, what looked like a screw up in the literal terms may have been, in fact, that you've run into your own humanity in some way, your own intelligence in some way that did not give too much of a crap about the literal reality that you were in. That somehow an energy imposed itself on the situation, not as an imposition, but just somehow you meet a space. And in meeting that space, it introduces you to, let's say, you've naturalized the creative life. But in retrospect, in having the creative life, you see that its beginnings and ends and all of this were kind of written into the script. And that you introduce time and space to it. And it's the unfoldment of the very thing that existed in the Bindu point, love and hate, you stretch it out in time and space. And in that time and space, reasoning is the logic of continuity. So suppression of inner feelings or creative feelings in order to maintain the status quo is the norm. But obviously in the suppression and repression of what would have been normal into a hidden life, not only a discrete life, but a sneaky life, because it interferes with the status quo, because there's a missing conversation when survival takes over, and a kind of fear of introducing an honest conversation. Not a psychological conversation or a neurotic conversation, but you see that almost all of life is missing a heartfelt. And the thing is that the heartfelt somehow has to be genuine, not coming from this sense, the self sense of continuity, but where it is a shared experience. So then you see almost the genuineness of a creative act when you're touched by it, if you view it or you read it or something, and there's something that touches you and is genuineness, and it's not spelled out what that is, it is spelled out what it's not. But somehow what is not laid out for you, it's to be discovered. What is not as obvious, you've got a lot of choices available. But the sheer exploration, or the life as an exploration, not only completely naive, as if the literal survival is not there, but you see the management of that aspect of the life where it's not the dominant force. So I think I mentioned in my mind's eye that money for us meant freedom from money, or freedom from all the elements that are supposedly natural with money, making more of it, doing this, when in fact you are allowing it somehow to free your creativity to some extent, where it's a creative life, where fear is not the dominant force. so that you then experience fear as a creative expression also, not something to be conquered or gotten rid of, but also when somehow you are freed from the, not freed in terms of entitled, but somehow you're navigating through the status quo. And it hasn't literalized in that form. It's still a creative life for you. The everyday is still as long as it seems normal, but it still comes out of a creative life. And your consciousness of that is that you're, even if you're writing about it or you're sharing it or reading about it, it's because you're living it. So to some extent, you're reading even in someone else's life. It's not someone else's life. You're reading about your own life in it. When you're now writing, you're writing about you as the character in it, but there's a space between you and the literal character. And that space is sacred. And it sometimes can be woo-woo, horror show, scary, sacred, but usually it has more schmaltz in it than that. So that I feel that it's a creative sense that runs through the life. And that in that, it's not a possessive. Somehow you get to be with the whole thing. And somehow I feel that this happens in literal terms, where it looks like the past comes into the present, but in fact has never been past. It has always been parallel. And even if it literally didn't exist in form any longer, it existed somehow in the fabric of your being, somehow in your cellular structure, there was a memory. And so somehow there are moments when you discover that you are not you. You are the carrier of something that is happening. So there's a difference between you then translate the things that we were talking about last week and sleep into no longer something that you're forced to do, but something that you're relaxed with, and you sleep as you create your own sleeping patterns. And it's not only naive, it releases the story from its premise of a literal continuum as being you, when increasingly you are more of a creative being who's managing your eating anyway, you're managing your sleeping anyway, but you just are shedding light on what is normal. And when you shed light on what is normal, you see that the living itself, there's a creative dimension to it. And that there is an integrity of expression that is not laid out. Again, it is laid out as it is in most creative expressions, if you sell out and everyone can hear the clunker. Would you say, Catherine, everyone can hear if it's too clunky? And you can send some money to the Buddhist Society for the people living in, okay. And so it's amazing. There's still, you take an expression so it doesn't completely literalize the work as work. But the management of a dual situation of the survival sense of continuity and the creative sense where somehow you're having a front row seat of your own life as it's unfolding. At the same time that you run into the story and live it, you're getting a shot to be the director and one of the main characters in the story, Catherine. How does it look to you? From a Buddhistic perspective, we'll say, okay.
Oh, that's
From
true.
a Buddha, Catherine, looking into the Catherine story, does it seem okay?
Well, it's like you're watching someone else's story.
Yeah, has the
You're
interpretation, was the translation okay, or did they screw it up?
Translation of what?
Was your interpretation of what happened to you on the mark, or were you completely off?
You mean what you just said?
No, what I'm saying in the last 60 years now, looking back at the story through this lens, was it what you thought?
Well, it was like a different person. I look back
Yeah.
on like
Yeah.
observing without being connected or something.
I find that an out of circumstance kicks off a circumstance that existed. It looks like it was existing from 40 years ago, but it was right over my right ear all along. And that somehow I had intuited throughout time when there would be a sniff or a hearing or something suggesting something, that somehow that part of the ear would start to, okay, it didn't literalize the story, but somehow you understood there was a different time, that you were not you only, you were also waiting for certain experiences in not literal time, in evocative time, that somehow you had to be in a certain place yourself, whether it's a dream, whether it's watching a movie, but somehow there had to be a lineup for you to see what has been obvious. But obvious only because there's an aha moment hidden in plain sight in some circumstance that kind of allows you to see the picture a bit from the other side of you, looking into the story. Almost as if when I kid around with this wishful thinking of the angel becomes Catherine. Catherine doesn't want to do it any longer, but an angel flying overhead says, I'll do her. I'd love to have the experience. Then you say, okay, then I'm kind of understanding in my own dopey mind what it means to be there for one's life. And when you're being there for one's life, you see that things that were maybe coming to you with anger or hurt or whatever, you're seeing the other side of the anger from the creative perspective. You're seeing even hatred as if you were employing it in your novel. And so you see how it, so you have perspective. So then the I forgives, I feel. And it's not that it forgives you. You see that something happens into you where you release the story.
I don't
And
think I've
the story then released gives you an insight. Yeah. But no, I'm utilizing something that's happening maybe for you. I don't know literally, but it's certainly happening for me, that you're reflecting back to me. So I'm sorry if I threw Buddha in the last moment, but when it's actually, we're almost on that kind of level ourselves. We are sitting around the mystery. And so to some degree, even though we're looking at the literal world, we're also seeing these dimensions in the everyday. And so we can, even in hearing what the news is implying out there, there's broken hearts waiting in every angle, in every closet, in every memory. When it's released from the ownership, you see immediately becomes a broken heart. But broken heart meaning kind of access to a world that has been avoided. Thank you, Shorty. No, I think someone maybe, somebody's yelling out there. Oh, hi there. Oh, there's a package. Can you come here?
I like that. Oh, I love it.
Excuse us all, how crazy we must look. Hey, Ray. Boy,
They had their moment of
I think it
fame.
was UPS package to the door and all the dogs ran up to the screen, so okay.
Danny, I'm not sure I relate to much of that, but I don't think I've ever felt hatred toward anyone.
Hated?
I have never felt hatred
Oh, no, no.
toward
No,
anyone.
hatred is a death experience while you're alive to some extent. So I would say no, that I don't see that within the framework Well, someone told me recently that a son from years ago that they hadn't seen, and here they were dying, or they were pretty sick or whatever, and this then boy came into their life as a man and said he hated him and he wished him dead, and straight up like that. No, just that, you know, that all that years and this and that. So that was a straight up conversation, supposedly. Now, I'm sure from that perspective, there is after the fact, when the story is no longer literal, one may say, I'm sorry, Papa, for being such a jerk. You understand that I didn't see you in the situation that you were in, but my story prevailed. Okay. But having access to the story takes it away from one's ownership. And from that perspective, it was the same framework that in homeopathy originally, that somehow, if you, not by training or motive or anything like that, but generally, when you first felt the pain, you sought to relieve it. And so it was part of the continuum. But if you explored the nature of the pain, you started to, worlds that were hidden to you were revealed. The exploration of it then to some became a life expression because it opened a doorway creatively where the literal self was not the owner of the story. The history was not the owner of the story. So to some, I feel that an event that seems to be a crazy an event to some opens up a doorway of creativity where it becomes normal to have a creative life. So I'm not so sure that the literal explanation. What do you say? How do you see it?
I don't think there's a choice. I think some of us lead a creative life because it's the way we perceive the world, and that's who we are.
Well, let's say I have
It's
a
not
moment of
like I will
perception.
lead a creative life. It just,
I think the difference between that is discovery. I feel it is a creative life, thought as a normal life.
yes.
But when you look at it, there's a holy shit moment waiting. But that view it can be having only from no motive. I mean, the doer would try to run into the story and put some makeup on. So somehow the doer is left out of the creative aspect of the story. That there was a parallel life living with us that in fact gave us a creative life comes home to one as a discovery. That the events that seem literal were the events that created a kind of challenge. That where one had to rethink themselves over nothing. So I feel that has happened to us where our lives have been interrupted in such a way that it had to be rethunk, and not only the literal Social Security rethinking, but that much of it, especially when it comes about through relationship, much of the expression, and that relationship shifts. And then you're left with aspects of that relationship as part of your expression. There are moments of discovery that the life has been creative all along, but your access to the creativity in your own life has been through your expression. Your expression has allowed you, or allowed me or us, to then discover dimensions in ourselves.
Yeah.
In that discovery of those dimensions, it becomes less of a possessive of the self. It becomes more a life coming from somewhat of a different place. Survival is still in it, but it also tends not to own the story, literally. So then you see a world that is dominated by survival as being inhuman. And you see it because it's true, not because it's when that instrument that has a place in expression But when that instrument is the main force of continuity, then it eliminates the creativity. It fears creativity. It fears any reflection. So of course it creates deep hurt, deep explosions, deep violations of itself so that it will be forced to have a soul searching. And so when you look out the window, you see a world that is not only going by around you, but you see a soul searching dimension running through the story. And when you even put on the news, independent of the literalness of the news, you see a kind of soul searching still happening while it attempts to literalize itself. You see it's still in flux. And so seeing it somehow deeply enough inherently comes into your, it becomes second nature to you now to see elements of that in things that you're interacting with. So I don't know how you got here, Catherine. But you're telling me you got here in a very normal way.
I'm not sure there's any.
So that's what I'm
Here
saying.
now.
And when you see it, then almost every time you meet someone, you meet a creative life. If the person just walked past or this or that, you meet a literal life. But if you have a 5-second conversation, you start to meet other dimensions of something that they may
Yes.
not even be able to share with those that they literally share life with, but there may be an evocative moment. So then you meet a person as a container of all these experiences in themselves. And that's, but somehow the hello has to be genuine. Somehow the understand, so that somehow the conversation has to be a genuine enough situation where it has no motive per se, where it releases forces that were simply hidden from the literal world. How is it to be you? Is a very tough question. And that question, if there's a soulful moment where, how the hell is it to be you? They say, holy shit, man, I'll catch you later. I gotta do this thing. Okay. And so you see, there are moments, even in dopey, accidental conversations, that there's a break from the literalness of the story. And so you see, even the dumbness of a naive meeting has an angelic element to it that looks at the world from that space, from the cloud, as they say. And when you look at it from the cloud, what was the film years ago when they looked at it from the cloud and they were envious of people? They thought they were morons and crazy, but they wanted to have the experience. Now, there's the German film that's, what is that, Derek? Again?
Wings of
Wings of
something.
Desire, yes, Wings
Yeah.
of Desire.
Yeah.
And then I think in the second film, he opens up, the angel opens up a pizza shop or something. In
Yes.
Berlin. Yeah, okay. Well, no, he becomes an acrobat also. Well, he loves the acrobat.
He falls in love with a trapeze artist who has wings.
So
Yes,
the movie is Wings of Desire. You know it there?
I
Everyone knows
would
it.
love to see it again.
Yeah. But there were a few like that also before where they had angels looking at people.
Yes, I
And
wrote
describing-
one.
And then
I
there's
wrote
also
one.
Puck. There's also Puck, a little Puck who says, what fools these mortals be, you know.
Did you ever see Unlikely Angel with Dolly Parton?
I saw.
I wrote that.
saw
It
yesterday.
deals with an angel coming down to earth, and yeah, it's
We saw
about
the weirdest film called Puck. What was it with Mickey Rooney?
Midsummer Night's Dream.
With Mickey Rooney.
Yeah,
This little dopey Mickey Rooney, but he was a little boy, maybe about 10 years old, and he plays Puck. But they had the most amazing musical sequences in the beginning of the film with just lights of people moving through the darkness like that, singing songs and rushing through the forest. And then little Puck, Mickey Rooney in the tree speaking about mortals and people. And it was weird enough, but I taped it. It's probably from 1930 something.
Ouais.
But we said, well, look at this. How do they film the beginning, the opening? It was pretty spectacular, you know. So there are parallel dimensions happening. And so it seems to me that the parallel dimensions have some access in a creative, to some extent, where you see that the life at the same time is literal, has been creative. The two elements have been parallel. At the same time, it literalizes rent. Sometimes I now come back and say, holy shit, I'm going to have to act like a person now to this landlord and act like I know. Okay. So I go in there and I dress up and I talk to the landlord. Okay. And I say, okay, can I do that? Can I make believe that I'm a tenant for about 15 minutes or 20 minutes? That is it possible that it's not only conscious, like literal consciousness like that, but you can assume the identities for the moment, but you are not literally the identity. You're assuming the identities. Why is it possible? And I say, because it's happening anyway, except some shedding light on it. Something happens where you shed light on the life as an actor.
Yeah.
Where you went in, you dressed up to meet the landlord, you applied for a job, you did this, you did this whole, but something illuminates it and changes it from slavery, where somehow you are assuming identities, you are not the identities. That somehow some experiences happen for you where the identity itself has a creative dimension to it. And that means it can be in a situation, but if somehow it's violated and it's not spelled out what violated means, but somehow if it's violated, it's not only reasoned there, but somehow the continuity ends and a kind of self-reflection takes over. And self-reflection in its authenticity interrupts the continuity, because it doesn't see the continuity be the primary objective of the existence then. It sees a kind of integrity of being to be right up there with the survival. So somehow the events open up a doorway perceptively where the life is being lived and has been lived intuitively in some ways on those levels anyway. But some event may shed light on what was thought to be an intuitive aspect. But once it's revealed, it enters into the everyday life as part of it creatively. So that's the experience that I've had and I think we're having, or that I see. Of course, you still may need to pay the rent on time and do the literal. But it does seem to me that we are managing pain in its own way. And what intuitively we're attempting to manage pain so it doesn't dominate fully. And it allows you creative space. And the creative space may simply be being, watching something, doing something. You see that somehow the experience itself has a creative dimension to it. And so for me, I'm feeling a being there for it, where it's not spelled out. But where events seem to coincide or coexist, we'll say, where it can, being there can be, you rat bastard, I should break your head, or baby, I am you know, somehow the release of the story as being seen wholly entirely creatively, where somehow everyone who participated in the experience sees it from the experience. So we'll call it holy shit, Catherine. Is that okay? It's bullshit, and also probably the way we've lived our lives has some sacred dimension to it. Okay. So a kind of being there for it, because in some ways we have some magic somehow happened in our lives. We have given perspectives. Our lives have been around perspectives or journeys. We've made our regular life, we've examined it from the journey perspective. So in finding that from the journey perspective, it's not only a literal experience that we've had, but we've had the literal experience so that we can have the magical aspect of the experience in reflection. That the literal story releases the underpinnings. So at the same time, one may have a pain in the neck, as we say. One is also have lived a life. And it seems to me that there is a kind of quality of being there for it without it being spelled out. It's probably what it's not is spelled out. But the naturalness we're talking about is not exactly spelled out in books or whatever. It's a kind of naturalness that comes with where your life somehow becomes an artwork. And then so what ingredients you'll use in the film or in the painting or whatever are very important to you. So at one point, it's writing your perception of what the experience has been. From looking out your balcony window, and you say, Urja, what the hell happened? And you say, I was born in Paris to this couple, okay, something like that. And it starts there.
Yeah.
And if you look now, it seems like it started before there. That somehow these people had to meet, for you to arrive. And if you look at it, you would see maybe that meeting was very weird also.
Yeah.
So as I start to look at the history of my own existence, I don't discover history, I discover weird. As far as the eye can go, it's weird. And then as I look back at my life, I also say, oh, weird. A continued weirdness.
But there is always a thread of magic.
So then I say, then maybe they also had it. Maybe these two crazy people that had you had a crazy idea that they could make a life or something like that.
I
Or
sure hope
they were
so.
together about something, or they were scared shit about where the world was, and they hugged each other and they made you. Then they woke up and they say, what the hell are we doing? Let's get out of here. Then they wanted to split up and they say, no, what should we do with her? Is that the way life works, you think? That you
Often.
discover somehow you were an accident? Is there something in the discovery that changes the picture? Let's say you were deeply loved.
Well, my mother wanted a baby. He didn't want one.
No, not the story so much. Let's say you carry, let's say I'm him.
Yeah.
And I'm in that situation. Let's say you're him for a minute. You're your father. And you're in that situation where you say, I'm getting the hell out of here. I think I'm getting the hell out of Paris.
Yes.
Okay. I got
And he did.
I'm sorry, this is our kidding around with our own lives.
It's okay.
But it's a sort of flying over the story of what we thought was literally natural.
Yeah.
Also has so many our own lives, but it's only upon discovery that it's released. When it's literalized, we have an identity that we act on, and that identity seeks survival as the medium. So it then makes a literal world around survival as being the important element. But then there are other forces that say, no, there is discovery, there is one's own humanity. And so governing it, where somehow the life is cared for by being literalized, but there is a human experience. And when there is a kind of feeling of friendship or affection, you see humans cross lines and meet as human. Meeting as a human, then they may relate to identity. So there are some feelings that transcend identity. That identity fears. Because the one who sees human running through the story and then identity around it. So you may see an experience with any different sort of person that touches you if they're in trouble or something, and it touches something in you where the human is touched. And the structure around you may fear that in you. But that is also an indication of an I and thou element that exists. And that somehow that is active, even though there's a literal life being lived, there are other forces that are also dynamically being lived. And that being touched by something may open up a pathway that once you experience it, that becomes necessary in your literal existence. So I keep in touch, Irja. Let me know how things are working out for you. But it
Thank
seems
you.
okay now.
Yes, but something is shifting with me about it. It's like I feel I want to have more space.
Okay, let's see. So are you okay with it? You'll see what it's
Yeah,
saying to you?
yes. Thank
So
you.
let's say at this point in time, confusion is not exactly confusion. It's not.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Let's say at one point we were confused about vaccines or whatever. Okay. So they say, well, confusion seems to be, that's the way we've been living our life anyway. So confusion doesn't seem to be stupidity. It doesn't speak to me yet, or it speaks to me this way. So for me, sure, I then had to, because I would do mañana, I do mañana about it. Well, next time or whatever. But then once I'm related to an I and thou situation where people have to,
Yes.
there's a dialogue happening then with the social framework. So then it becomes rather, there's a hey baby invitation that I can assume that, where I'm not literally in the world, but I assume a literal dynamic through relationship. So I had to be Meshuggah. I'm sorry, Catherine. I didn't, okay. It has to be
Why?
by accident or by, oh, I was just walking past, or, it was someone, friend calls you up to do this or something like that. So somehow it has to have the friendly in it. It didn't only have to have, the life-saving guy never really spoke to me. I was never dependent on the social framework to save my life. In fact, I never even knew that they even tried to save my life. As far as I can see, the social fabric always tried to end my life in some way, not save it. So it's not to dispute them. There is a social fabric, but I still don't feel them to be the owners of our lives. So I can't shift right wing into literalness of it, and I can't shift. We're us, and we're managing our life now. And you'll borrow from your past and your circumstance to, you'll see when to literalize it, when to become part of it, but it has an I and thou quality to it. And it's more your relationship to the other, to the neighborhood, to the friends, to whatever, that it takes on, not so much the doer. Is that okay?
Hmm.
What do you think? Is it too wishful thinking? That the doer is in fact the doing doesn't become such a big deal at a certain point. The doing seems like, so that's why I says, you want to do this? And I says, maybe tomorrow or something like that, because it's always suggesting stuff. But there's a point when the doing, the being seems now to be happening as a fact. There is a kind of beingness where you see an irrelevance to the literal world for some hours in your day. And so you see it's not only activating the doer, doing something about it. because the doer measured the world, and if you didn't do something about it, that was your measurement. But if it hit harder than the doer, where doer came out of seeing, not doing came out of avoiding seeing. So let's say seeing does. It's a difference in identity where it seems to solve problems by doing. Then you see that doing is one tool that you have, not the owner of the story. It's not what to do, but it is seeing something. And seeing it deeply enough will reveal. If there's something to do, it comes out of somewhat of the seeing. But if a doing comes out of a self-protective element, which is normal, then it literalizes the story. So that's usually what happens in many of our lives when there is a breakup or whatever. The story then became literalized of who did this and who did that, and that literalness becomes the description of what happened when it existed on so many weird levels and this and that, and yet a description of this and that literalizes the story, and it's still parallel with you, and you meet it again. And you see, for that story to have existed, there was a feeling. In that story to have shifted, there had to be a shift in the feelings. You see, the feelings created a life in some way, and the feelings ended a situation also. And you become exposed to something that's been parallel all along. That there has been a life of feelings, that once it literalizes as a thing, that it seeks to continue. So one visits, in retrospect, the movie of their own life, and they see what happened. And they see what happened not only from the literal level, but they see the creative dimension that was happening in the life. And in seeing the creative dimension, it releases the story from one's ownership, the literalness of it.
Mm.
And you say, why? Because in order to see it, one had to somehow be in a certain state themselves. Because that perception has to come from a real place, a genuineness in the person. And so the genuineness of one's life experience is non-ownership of the story. The ownership of the story was a way of surviving, carrying it out. But it's not a possessive of the story. The story of one's life is lived on many levels. It usually, one perceives at different levels through what appears to be accidents. And I say, why? He said, because the accident interrupts the motive of continuity or self. If you meet the humanity of the other that you had enslaved in your view of them, then something transforms in you. Because the literalness of the story is built to continue and survive. If you see that you assumed an identity around the event, and yet you let the other go to hell in some way, the other had to play this character for you in your description. Then there's also a moment when you have the experience that you gave in a situation, because you see there was a genuineness in the love affair that allowed you to be hurt so bad. So you understand that you visit one's life story not only as the owner of the story, but from experiencing it from another place that was present while it was happening, but can be only reached when one is somehow in a space themselves. And you see how much we've tried to visit that space.
Yeah.
And we've presumed that means superior to the story psychologically, or this, or free from it, all these quotients. But you see the purity of the story won't let you get away with any trick.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's embarrassing or this, that's the aspects of one part. When you are there for it, you see that somehow it's as if you, a director, screenwriter, actors, everyone got together and you saw the intensity in the story, what it took to create the intensity, what it took to create the shame and the hurt and the premise. But then you're seeing shame no longer as I am ashamed or being shamed, but on the other side of shame as the author, utilizing shame as revelation. Where shame is accusation and shame is more war and this and that. On the other side of shame, looked at from this perspective of being there for the experience, you see, in order for there to have been shame in the story, there had to be a true feeling in the story. And that somehow, even though the events took place literally, you see that that experience was inherently waiting in the story. And that you view your own existence from a perspective of non-ownership and not literal, where it's news to you. And you may discover what others may have known all along, but you discover. So is it okay that we've accentuated this time in some way? That we're
Thank you.
sharing?
Well,
Yeah.
really, it really helps.
But literally, how do you feel in managing things?
Physically, it's day to day.
Yeah.
But there's still some. Yeah, I mean, it's a mystery.
It seems to be. Well, let's call it up in the air. What do you say, Kai? How's it going for you now?
I don't know. It's been a little rough the past week or two.
A little what?
Rough.
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 Yeah.
Rough.
Well, then maybe, and it's been rough for you the past week or two. Well, I think we'll be having rough coming. Or unknown, let's say unknown, or where we are with it, or. And I also have a series of physical events where I have to go through the examination to see where it's at and what's happening. And I do feel that I've been kind of hiding, not hiding, but managing or working with it to some extent. But so we'll see if it's a hey baby where it's come back or not, or we'll see with the examination or whether it's just a moment. But other than that, it does seem I'm pretty healthy and hanging around. But it also seems that, and I'm not having that literal kind of pain. I feel pretty interesting that I'm still pretty flexible in it.
Mm.
But at the same time, I also feel that I can say bye-bye any moment. And without literalizing it so much, but that somehow, and that must also be perceived in the relationships. So then, Urja, if you're feeling bye-bye any moment, then they may also be feeling it. They may be knocking on your door every now and then. So let's say
it
we are
happens.
experiencing something that is happening
Yes, there are moments.
where hello and bye-bye isn't actually every moment. There's hello and bye-bye in every moment in the situation. Yes. And now one thing that was very weird that Spiro found very interestingly strange was an article in the New York Times in the business section. If I may read this, Kai?
Is it from Sunday?
It's in Dolls and Cartoons. Devoted fans in Japan see marriage material. And this fellow then, for the first time, this wind is coming in, married a fictional character. You know, and you can now marry fictional characters in Japan. His beloved Hatsune Miku is a turquoise-haired, computer-synthesized pop singer who has toured with Lady Gaga and starred in video games. After a decade-long relationship, one that Mr. Kondo says pulled him out of a deep depression, he held a small unofficial wedding ceremony in Tokyo. Miku, in the form of a plush doll, wore white, and he was in a matching tuxedo. In Miku, Mr. Kondo has found love, inspiration, and solace, he says. He and his assortment of Miku dolls eat, sleep, and watch movies together. Sometimes they sneak off on romantic getaways, posting photos on Instagram. Mr. Kondo, 38, knows that people think it's strange, even harmful. He knows that some, possibly those reading this article, hope he'll grow out of it. And yes, strange story, but I'm getting a windstorm here. Look at this. Yo. He knows that Miku isn't real, but his feelings for her are, he said. When we are together, she makes me smile. In that sense, she's real. Mr. Kondo is one of thousands of people in Japan who have entered into unofficial marriages with fictional characters in recent decades, served by a vast industry aimed at satisfying the every whim of a fervent fan culture. Tens of thousands more around the globe have joined online groups where they discuss their commitment to characters from anime, manga, and video games. For some, the relationships are just for a laugh. Mr. Kondo, however, has long known that he didn't want a human partner. Partly it was because he rejected the rigid expectations of family life, but mostly he was because he had always felt an intense and even to himself inexplicable attraction to fictional characters. Accepting this feeling was hard at first, but life with Miku, he argues, has advantages over being with a human. She's always there for him. She'll never betray him, and he'll never have to see her get ill or die. He sees himself as part of a growing movement of people who identify as fictosexuals. Fiction sexuals. That's partly that what has motivated him to publicize his wedding and to sit for awkward interviews with news media around the globe. He wants the world to know that people like him are out there, and with advances in artificial intelligence and robotics, allowing for more profound interactions with the inanimate, that their numbers are likely to increase. It's about respecting other people's lifestyles. It's not unusual for a work of art to provoke real emotions, anger, sorrow, joy, and the phenomenon of desiring the fictional is not unique to Japan. But the idea that fictional characters can inspire real affection or even love may well have reached its highest expression in modern Japan, where the sentiment is given rise to a highly visible subculture and become the basis for a thriving industry. The name of it is called Moe, M-O-E, a term that has become shorthand for just about anything that is viscerally adorable. So let's say you just have an adorable mate who's home for you when you get home and waits there, and you call up and says, bring me some candy or whatever, and it's, and then they have, I think for $1,600, they say you then have a virtual machine here where Miku, the pop singer, is like your wife or your husband or whatever, and you have any sort of relationship you have, you're self-created or whatever. And then the other one was, should you sell crypto? Should you teach preschoolers crypto or NFTs, especially in the classroom? And they said they are teaching them, this agency, and you see all the kids together singing crypto songs and what to invest in and what's best to do. And okay. And so the other one says, hold on, are you guys crazy? What are you doing? That these kids should be kept pure. But the other one said, no, we're teaching them how to finance. And they said, no, you're teaching them how to think a certain way, because what you're doing sneakily is that you're getting them to say, oh, would you like to buy this crypto doll that we've just made? And all the kids say, yeah. And so you're really selling them stuff, and you kind of, it's like the medical business. You're giving them treatment so they keep on coming back to you, where there's no cure. But then the others say, no, we're having some hip kids who immediately, as they're preschoolers, they know how to handle bank accounts, they know how to invest, they know what's happening. They know more than their parents know at the age of 4 years old or 5 years old. Okay. So that was also in the Times, a very thing. And it was also in the business or art. I think it was in art because NFTs, they said that they're teaching these children. And so some of it was that they were teaching children how to navigate the world. But the other one was that that's bullshit. You're teaching, you're taking away these kids' lives in some way. And you're teaching them to think this way. And so that's where Spiro was on that side, where he says, that's bullshit, sounded horrible. But then their premise of it was that it was good for the kids to be really aware of how to navigate the world. From the
It's,
get-go. But it was their world they were talking about. It wasn't our world.
I think I saw about one episode. I could not bear it to see that little kid next to a lot of traffic with this little flag.
You saw the kids walking around?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was part of their training. There's a series there where they let the kid go shopping.
Oh, yes.
That one was 2 years old, or 2 years and 3 months old, and the other one was, most of them were 2 to 4 years old. But then everyone in the town knew about it in some cases. They were all watching the kid go through it. So it was a kind of initiation. But it was scary looking or weird looking. Or was it rehearsed?
I think some of it was, but
So
I think for the kid it was real.
let's see how it unfolds there. Are you okay? So Spiro has been doing at Minetta there. He's been going there and teaching a class. And then I think he mentioned today about doing some podcasts with me or something from there.
Nice.
So, and they're looking at it from different angles.
Oh, that's cool.
And then folks who are working in the spirit store are also visiting there, and they're also seeing it from a different perspective. So we'll see how it unfolds, if anything unfolds around that.
Yes.
And I think that the month of May maybe should be very deep. I don't know literally, but I'm just anticipating certain things flying overhead.
Yeah.
What do you say? Are you managing then, Kai? You're managing your scene there?
Yeah, I guess. I'm sure. I don't know. It feels a little testy right now.
Anytime that, let's say you were making a film together, and then you would understand what the touchy is. And you would understand when it felt okay, that there was something shared between you, and then so that you would see sentiments run through it. It's not so much doing something about it, but seeing that somehow you are in a creative space yourself. And you are managing in a way that is kind of hidden. It would be missed if it was gone. But it's hard to experience while you're there, except in certain moments. So it's hard to say thank you, mommy, unless you say thank you, mommy. It's very hard to say thank you, mommy, isn't it? In this life, thank you, mommy. So let's say thank you, mommy would have to be really thank you, mommy. It's a shared feeling. So there are times for you, I feel that when it's a shared feeling. And then there are times where you see that people have inner lives of their own desires, their own this or that, their own issues. So I feel that ironically, you're caring for the creative dimension of it, how it will be remembered, how it will affect the lives of everyone in time. The Dharma and, the magic aspect of it that enters, that you can only see in time and missing and memory and stuff like that. So that, I think that's the real relationships, not only the literal one of overseeing it, but the memory aspects of it, where there's a genuine moment that can be shared. And so I feel that you'll see at times when, if it's not appreciated in a way, and it may not be literal, but that somehow everyone's in their head in such a way that it excludes you. You become a kind of ball buster. If you say, excuse me, I'm right. So if you start to feel it leaving you behind, then you are experiencing it leaving you behind. So let's say your experiences are now real creatively around a situation. And that somehow, like Ursha, the story is also freeing you, or not, it's not, you don't have to make a freedom yourself to do this or do that. That somehow the story is releasing it. It seems, and that's why a kind of weird please baby invitation, that it means something to someone. So while you have a world out there that may be waiting for you, that has a please baby, hey baby in there, the used to itness of our circumstance sometimes misses the magic of it. And it's perceived and lost in retrospect. So I feel we are in the midst of our own production to some degree. But we'll also have a glimpse of it from the light looking into the story. And you see that there are moments like there. So then I say, well, what releases me to get the shot? There are moments that release you from the literalness of the story where it wasn't the self getting it or not getting it or anything like that. And I let something happen. So I had to make it look naive in the world out there, but it was not naive. There has to be a feeling that releases the story for me to do it. Then I say, why? Because if I had to reflect, it flies in the face of my naturalness or whatever, which is not laid out for me, but what is not, what doesn't fit into the circumstance does speak. But what to do is not so laid out. But what not to do, you see it, where the doer doesn't own the story. And that it comes from a certain place, the doing. So then somehow the doing is an aspect of some kind of feelings that is shared or what is happening. I feel that is not only something that is thought of, but is actually taking place in the everyday. And that's what I'm sharing with you, which is hard to experience while you're in it. But in a kind of shared space without it becoming too much for Catherine to hear, without it becoming wishful thinking, you see that it's not wishful thinking, that there's a parallel life. And that's as real as anything. And that creative dimension of life had real, anytime it felt violated or lost, that was the real violation. Anytime one's self-respect or dignity or the being was affected or wounded. They tried to have this, literally this story and that story, but it's not. There was a soulful hurt. And the soulful hurt somehow changes one's relationship to the literal story that they're in. Now, whether the soulful hurt is inherently written into the story, experientially, but there's a time when one sees the life from a different place where it is no longer dominated by a history. And I feel at that point, when it is no longer dominated by a history, the history has a mystery element to it that has discovery in it. If you read a diary of a parent's past, or you discover this, you discover dimensions that were hidden in plain sight. And in discovering, there's something precious, something very important that happens to the eye. It perceives a hidden story in the everyday. And as you perceive a hidden story in the everyday, that becomes part of your life expression. And you see it happening around us to some degree creatively out there, where people are having certain feelings and work is becoming something else, and health, everything is up in the air as to what it is. But there's an exploration that's happening. You okay, Urja?
Yeah,
Let's hang out.
somehow I
Hang out
was
until Sunday. Oh, I won't see you on Sunday, will I?
a little bit, but I can't
Yeah,
stay
okay.
long. Yeah, but there's tomorrow also. Tomorrow is
Yeah, I'll
Thursday.
see. Derek, tomorrow, you're okay with that? How is all this happening here? Well, I think that Spiro wants to kind of expand on it, so he'll let everyone know about it. And if I go down to Minetta to do some afternoon there or something.
Yes,
And it may
I
even
think
be
it's
nice
true.
with, well, everyone who's coming to look at it now is becoming really inspired by it. So we'll see if anything happens. It's just like a little sweetheart of a space.
Yes, yes.
But maybe I'll ask Mary to send you some pictures there, Kai,
Yeah, that would be great.
just to see what it looks like. You know what it looks like, right, Derek?
You
Well,
don't
I
have
think
sound
they've
here.
done work on it now, and so we'll see. We'll see if that becomes an expression here or not. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow night then.
Thank you,
Thank
Bye-bye,
Danny.
everybody. Namaste. Take care.
Namaste. Bye, everybody.
Say bye to your little one. Huh?
You look beautiful, Kai.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Whoa, what happened?
It's my construction. Someone
Don't
made
fall
it.
down. She said, "You look beautiful, Kai," and then fell down. Uh-oh.
Thank you, Ursha.
We'll see you then. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.